Welcome back to the Tul World podcast. I'm your host, David Ju, and I'm here with Master Ju.
Hello there, Mr. Ju. It's another week, and we're still cold.
Yeah, still cold. Okay, so this week we're going to be kind of talking a little bit why we do certain things. More specifically, some of the different stances that we have, right?
That's kind of a continuation of what we talked about last week.
Right. And so one of the questions was like, well, why do we have so many different stances for the same punch or the same block? You want to kick it off for us?
Okay. Well, that's also like someone says, well, why do I punch with this way versus this way? Why? Well, I always say, well, can you punch with your left hand? Can you punch with... So there are different ways of doing things. They're very similar, but you have to identify them. If you want to be clear about it, right? So we're talking about a lot of, again, it's theoretical. And, you know, I think we got to look at it. A dojang, what is a dojang? It's to teach these ideas on how to move our body, or if you want to say self-defense, you can say self-defense, because it's a way to blocking and striking people, or whatever, right? Blocking or striking an animal, maybe.
What?
Would I use a square block against a tiger coming at me?
No.
I'm just playing around.
I see.
So yes, there are different stances in Taekwondo. You know, we have low stance, walking stance, L stance, rear foot stance, vertical stance, sitting stance, one leg stance, bending raise stance, all of these different stances. And the reality is that it's because we can do those things. However, in Taekwondo, we're teaching, like, let's say a walking stance. It's supposed to be 1.5 shoulder width from toe to toe, 1 shoulder width measure from the center of the foot, right? And it's supposed to be like that. But yet the students don't always do that. And so is that right or wrong? I always say, you know what? On an actual combat situation, it doesn't matter. The only thing matters is who's the last one standing. However, we can look at these stances, like we'll use walking stance, okay, because I think that's a good stance to look at. If you look at that stance, that's very, very stable. And we've done this example, right? That's where I have you stand parallel stance to me, and I could, look, I'm going to push you, and you're not supposed to move backwards. And what happens? You always move backwards. As a matter of fact, you might take a step back. Sometimes it's short, right? But if we put you in that walking stance and it's nice and sturdy, it's almost impossible to really push you back. Would you not agree with that? Okay.
Yes.
So we definitely know that that's a very stable stance. And that would be a stance like, if you were to push a car, you probably would do it, something like that. Not exactly, but probably something very similar to that. So when you understand those theoretical ideas, and when you start to look, let's break boards, that stance is really very stable. And so that means there's no rocking back. When I hit that board, there's no rocking back of the body. I mean, you're going to have a little bit, but in general, you won't have that. So theoretically, you're going to hit that board a lot harder, and you're probably going to break a lot more braking material than if you didn't have that.
So why would you want to do different stances for like the same punch?
Because we can. No, it is because no, I think it's because you can. I mean, give you an example. All right, this again, the very theoretical. It's what we do like in patterns and stuff like that. But when you look at these different stances, and Master Wheatley brought up a good point about that. If I'm in walking stance and someone's attacking me, I can slip into an L stance. And that amount of distance actually might prevent me from getting hit. So that's a dodging type of a movement, right? I don't always have to go from this stance and jump way back.
Right.
And so why would I want to do that? It's very similar to like boxing, where you might just slip, bob and weave. It's just to avoid, but you're still in the fight. In this case, I was in a walking stance. I threw a punch. He throwing an attack back. I slipped back into an L stance. We'll just say, because we're identifying stances. I want to say, hey, what stance are you just doing? Because I want to know. Someone might ask you that. And then, well, I just pull my leg back. Or I could say, oh, I push my leg forward. But if I can say, I'm in a walking stance and I slip back into an L stance. Walking stance is this and L stance is this. So I slip back and then I counterattack with a very similar punch or a similar attack, right? And so we have to learn how to be able to do different blocks and attacks in various positions, various stances. And we call these stances so that we can say, this is the stance we want you to be in.
And then show that distance.
And show that distance, a change. Right. We don't maybe explain that in class so much because that's just a lot of information. You get a white belt and you go, I'm just trying to learn to, I can't even move left and right.
Right.
I can't punch left and right. I don't know how to do that.
Right.
It's you see that true, isn't it?
Yeah.
You get brand new students. It's only when they get to a higher rank. What I'm trying to say is, and we talked about this last week, where black belts are novice, that's when I always kind of say, that's where you kind of learn, is that when you start to realize what you've been doing all of this time is working on all of these fundamental skills, and then how does it really start to apply in maybe self-defense, sparring, whatever. But we don't see that in sparring. You ever see anyone in a walking stance and then do an L stance and then they, execute a technique? You don't really see that too much.
No.
Right? I kind of think it's really the teaching the students, teaching ourselves how to move a certain way. Moving one foot back, moving one foot forward, slipping both feet back, taking steps, taking double steps, triple steps, whatever it is. It's just a way to help us move our body.
Right.
And we got to start somewhere because you can't just take a white belt and says, punch. And they go, whoa, okay. And you go, that's not going to work.
Well, no, that's actually true because when let's say you're doing drills in class and you want them to do a certain thing, like you want them to pull the foot back and then step forward on a punch, right? And so you're kind of changing that stance.
Right.
But what is the likelihood of that student being able to do that?
So low.
Pretty low, especially if that distance is not that big. Right? So by having these kind of elongated stances or shorter stances, right, you can really see that kind of change. Because a lot of times what you see is that the stance will be the same in length. Some people's L stance is the same as their walking stance, which is the same as their rear foot stance, right? And so they're still working on that kind of distance or that foot moving forward and backwards.
Right, absolutely. Not right or wrong. Again, in actual combat, it won't make a difference. The only difference is who is still standing. Well, we do see that, like in firearms training.
You have some different stances in there.
You do have different stances. You have like what they call the isosceles stance, which is like our walking stance, and the body's full facing, the arms extended, and you see that's a very fundamental way of pistol instructors teach that, right? You have a modified weaver.
Because it's less recoil as it comes back?
Right, less recoil. I mean, they'll explain all of that stuff, right? Just like in Taekwondo, and you go, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Would you actually do that in real life? You know what? Theoretically, that is probably the best way to handle something like that. I mean, if you're firing a gun, and you don't want to minimize, you want to get your tool back on target, right? But if your one arm is bent, it's going to move a certain way. You got to be able to get it back on. And it's not to say you can't, right? It's just that it's a lot easier to get back to your target that way. So they have modified weaver stance, they call it. And
what's that one?
Oh, it's kind of like an L stance.
Okay.
In a way, or a diagonal stance. It's like one shoulder width apart. It's not, it's a little bit more. It's a position where you can kind of move a little bit faster than like the isosceles stance, which is more like a
walking stance.
Like a sitting stance, right?
Oh, the isosceles is a sitting stance.
Right.
Oh,
right,
okay.
Right,
so it's
right.
not moving forward, but you do have a moving forward type of stance when you.
And it's really interesting because I have friends that are police officers, and we kind of talk about these things. And he says, "Oh, yeah, lately we've been teaching this idea," and I go, "Oh, walking stance." Goes walking stance, It's real similar to like Taekwondo. The way he explains this, like, we punch out the firearm. It's like, oh, like punching, right?
Yeah.
And when you it really is really interesting because there's very similar concepts. Like some of the guys that I've trained with, and they would say punch out the firearm. It's kind of like it's got to come straight up and then straight out. It's like punching. You don't want to do the like a
door knock.
Charlie's Angel. They call it Charlie's Angel, where the hands up and they come down, or the bowling,
right,
or fly fishing, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Different ways of doing that because your rounds could go up or down and just not right. It's got to go straight. And that's true with Taekwondo. You want your techniques to go straight. And so there's a lot of similarities. And he was saying, oh, yeah, we're a lot of us are doing this stance. And so let's say the left leg forward and the right leg is back like a walking stance, right?
Right.
But the body's so full facing. And I says, oh, why is that? And he says, it's just a little bit more stable because now you don't have any of that rocking back, you know? And that's what we talked about in the last podcast. And so they're kind of teaching that as well. Gives you a little bit more stability so that you can stay on their target. And I was like, oh, yeah. Taekwondo.
Right.
So there's different... even different arts, if you really want to try to explain a theoretical idea or something like that, you have to explain what is probably the most stable or the potential of it. Whether you would actually do that in real life, that's a different story. But you understand those fundamental principles, and then you work from there.
Right. Okay. All right, well, let us know your guys' thoughts on stance changing and, why do we do...
Walking stance,
or all these different stances for the same kind of techniques, right? Anyways, thanks for jumping in. Don't forget to be safe.
Keep training.
I'll see you guys next time.
Taekwon.